Controversial influencer Andrew Tate will face no criminal charges over allegations made by multiple women who are suing him in a UK High Court civil case. 4 women have accused Tate of sexual violence in 2015. The Crown Prosecution Service said today that the legal test to bring criminal charges had not been met in that case specifically. Well, Andrew Tate joins me now to discuss this. Andrew Tate, welcome back to Uncensored. Just to be clear, so for those who have not been following the multiple cases that you've been involved with, tell me what it is that you've been addressed with today in relation to these specific charges.
Yeah, for anyone who's not been following, I can make it very simple. I became the most Googled man in the world, and I was saying things they didn't like, and all of a sudden, every single country I'd ever stepped foot in started attacking me with all these strange legal cases from decades ago. And the process is the punishment. You and I have been speaking for a long time. We're old friends. And every time we speak, there seems to be some new case against me. And you quite, rightly say, we'll wait to see what happens in court. And here we are 4 or 5 years later, and they all fall by the wayside. So every single member of parliament, Vice News, BBC, every single person who said they've spoken to my victims has spoken to one of these girls. And the CPS has just said that these girls don't even have enough evidence to allow me to be charged, proving that they were lying all along. We know that people lie, both men and women, especially where there's a financial incentive. So this is just one step closer to my complete exoneration, sir.
OK, but as I understand it, and correct me if your understanding is different to this, as I understand it, this is one case involving 4 women who are concurrently running a High Court civil case against you. So they will have their case in a civil case, but it won't be criminal now. But that doesn't impact the other constabulary, which brought 21 charges against you and your brother Tristan earlier this year, right? That's still ongoing and still separate to this.
That's correct. So these 4 girls, they did a crowdfund and they begged the world for money. And they spoke to loads of MPs and Vice News, etc. And it turns out they have no evidence at all. They begged the world for money, and now they're suing me for money. They're desperate for money. And then they went to the police, and the police said they have no evidence. So that's all gone. The reason that the case against me here with these 4 girls was thrown out is because I know who the 4 girls are. So I simply just sent the text messages. Remember, I've been investigated. I haven't resisted any investigations. I'm one of the most investigated men on the planet. I'm more innocent than probably everyone else in that studio because I've been investigated head to toe. I have cooperated with the police. I provided proof. I provided text message conversations that these girls are lying, and the case was thrown out. The other case you're describing with the 21 charges from forever ago, the CPS won't tell me who the girls are because they know if they tell me who the girls are, then I will prove that the girls are lying before they can charge, remand, drag me through a trial. So their intention is to not tell me who they are, which is incredible to me, that they're saying you're charged and you need to go to jail. We want to remand you. Here's an extradition warrant, but we won't tell you who the people are. So I can't possibly defend myself because that's a setup. That's a matrix attack. But once I find out who they are, that case will once again be dismissed, just like this one was.
OK.
And
no, I'm going to make the point. I just want to be clear to viewers who are trying to follow all this because it's complicated.
Yeah. It's complicated. And I hate to interrupt you, sir, because I want you to talk. The only reason it's complicated is because they're trying very hard to drag up imaginary cases from the sky and they keep collapsing. It'd be very simple if I'd done something wrong.
Well, it is
if you do something wrong, you go to jail.
No, but I think it's important to use the correct language about what has happened here. It is a significant development. Clearly, the case that was brought against you by Hertfordshire police involving these 4 women, they have said they couldn't find evidence that met the bar for a criminal prosecution against you. It doesn't mean they can't continue these 4 women to continue the civil case against you, and it has no bearing as we sit here on the separate case brought against you by Bedfordshire Police, which the CPS announced separately in May, where it authorised 21 charges against you and Tristan, which included 10 against you relating to 3 alleged victims, including rape, actual bodily harm, human trafficking and controlling prostitution for gain. Tristan faces 11 charges connected to 1 alleged victim, including rape, actual bodily harm and human trafficking. So that is ongoing. Nothing that's happened today has any bearing on that prosecution by Bedfordshire Police. That's correct.
That's correct. And the reason that's ongoing, unlike the other one from Hertfordshire Police, is because they won't tell me who these victims are. And they won't because they know I'll get it thrown out in a week. I'll just say, well, here's the text messages proving they're lying. That's the end of the case, just like happened with the Bedfordshire one. So, correct. These girls can still sue me civilly. I can sue you civilly for having a terrible shirt, sir. It doesn't mean anything. I mean, they're desperate for money. I'm a very famous, very rich, very handsome, very charismatic, very well-known, very tall, very sexy individual. And lots of people want my money, and that's fine. They're going to lose in civil case too, because they know they've done nothing wrong. And the CPS has already said I've done nothing wrong twice now. So it is what it is. It's just, you know, it's quite interesting, Piers. If I was truly guilty of crimes, imagine how frustrating it would be to watch me for 4 years never go to jail. I mean, it's obvious to the whole world now that the process is the punishment for me, that I've never done anything wrong. Everyone knows I've done nothing wrong. The whole purpose of this is just to drag me to court, slander me in the media, make me spend money on lawyers, tie me up in litigation, restrict my movements. And that's all they're trying to do. The process itself is the punishment. They know I've done nothing wrong from the beginning. And you have sons too. And I like to believe that if your son was accused by all these different states from all around the world of all these heinous acts for 4 years, and he had to suffer jail and house arrest and lose all his money and have his name slandered, 4 years later, when all the cases started falling by the wayside, because the Los Angeles case has also fallen apart and collapsed, you yourself as a father would be standing there saying, this is incredible, this is insane, that we have an innocent man here who's just endlessly attacked.
Well, look, as I've said to you repeatedly, I don't know whether you're guilty or not. I follow the process. I'm a journalist. I don't look upon it as a father or someone that knows you or any of these things. To me, the fair and proper way is called due process. And my only concern with you is, have you been afforded due process? What is interesting to me is the length of time this is all taking. That doesn't seem to me to be normal. You do hear stories like it, but it seems to me out of the norm, and is certainly significant today that the criminal prosecution against you by one of these two British police constabularies has now been dropped, leaving a civil case there. That is clearly not an irrelevant fact as you and I debate this whole scenario surrounding you. But my question with the Bedfordshire police, from a legal perspective, are they obliged to tell you who the accusers are?
Well, that's what's so interesting. So you made a fantastic point there about this taking so long. The reason it's taking so long is because these cases are imaginary and they're stretching to the very, very limits of the law to try and pin something on my name. If I had done something wrong, it wouldn't be taking so long. So it's pretty obvious to anyone with a brain now that this is all a setup from the state. As for Bedfordshire, they are legally obliged to tell me who the victims are, the supposed alleged victims, but they only have to do that once I have been remanded. And if I go to the UK, I'll be remanded after this extradition warrant is executed. But that can't be executed currently because the Romanian state has a case against me for tax evasion, which will take at least 10 to 11 years. So this is something that's going to take 10 or 11 more years to eventually be satisfied. It's pretty ridiculous all in all. The whole thing is asinine, and I've done nothing wrong. And it's just crazy that the process itself is the punishment. We're going through all this garbage for so many years. And I like to think, and I respect your point of view. You made a very great point. You're a journalist. You follow the updates, completely correct. That's a very professional way to handle it. But I think also we're human. And from a humanistic perspective, anybody with a functioning mind can look at what's happened to me across these last 4 years and come to the conclusion they were out to get me. They don't have much. They're desperate to try and pin something on me, and they can't seem to make it stick. And that's why it's taking so long. Nothing's really happening. A lot of these cases are falling by the wayside. If I was truly guilty of anything, considering how much they don't like me, I think we both agree I'd be in jail.
The case that you mention in Romania, which has to be resolved in totality before you can be extradited back to the UK to face these charges from Bedfordshire police, my understanding is that that whole case is ongoing. It's not just relating to tax issues, that the whole case involving the human trafficking, rape allegations and so on, that is still unresolved. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, so what happened there is in December of last year, the entire case under the Biden admin was thrown back to prosecutors for irregular evidence, basically corruption. The entire case file was littered with corruption. They had lied and made multiple mistakes. They had made false translations. They had made false documents for false girls who didn't exist. They lied from head to toe. It's the kind of thing that a prosecutor would go to jail for in a serious country. But of course, we're in Romania. And even the Romanian court threw the entire file back and said, there's irregularities in evidence. Basically, it was all corrupt. And the entire file was thrown back to the prosecutor. And the prosecutor was told he has to fix this file. Here we stand nearly 11 months later. The file is just sitting on his desk. He hasn't fixed anything. He hasn't changed anything. And the reason for that is because how can you fix things you've made up? You can't. So he's
right. But what is important?
File.
Right. But this is why the language around this is important, because there are people already, I see it all over social media, who are seizing this development today, which is a not insignificant development. That's why I wanted to talk to you. But they're seizing on it to say Andrew Tate's been cleared of all wrongdoing. And they're saying he was cleared of all wrongdoing in Romania. But that's not actually technically correct as we sit here.
Well, technically, yes, it is, actually. The case was sent to court. The indictment was put together and sent to court. It went to the preliminary chamber, which is the Romanian version of checking if there's even a case to go to trial. And it was rejected by the preliminary chamber for irregularities in the evidence, saying that this is a falsified case. This is a political case where you've just lied about evidence, prosecutors. Give me something real. That's what the judge said. It's gone back to his desk for 11 months. And what's happened to it since, I'm not sure.
Right, but it's now, so my point being, it's unresolved, and that is the reason. Well, hang on, and that's why you've not been extradited back to the UK to face the other charges. I mean, that's from a legal perspective, that is where you are, right?
By Romanian law, when the case is rejected in the preliminary chamber, it goes back on the prosecutor's desk, and it can remain there for up to 10 years to basically be tried again at his discretion. So I understand he's going to try again at some point, perhaps with some of the financial crime. As we all know, I have lots and lots of money. I'm very, very rich. So the Romanians seem to be unhappy about parts of that. So perhaps he's going to send it back without the human trafficking and just the tax. Or maybe he'll leave a bit of the human trafficking in there. I'm not sure what he's going to eventually send it back with. But when he does send it back, that means it's 10 years before the British state can even attempt to extradite me. So I'll have to just drive around Transylvania in my supercars for 10 years while dealing with the Romanian court system.
Well, I mean, that does seem to be a preposterous situation. If indeed they did decide to string this out for many more years, which, of course, you know, look, like I said to you, I don't know about your guilt or otherwise. I simply follow the news as it develops. But certainly, if you're one of the women that are still awaiting the prosecution for the Bedfordshire charges, the idea that they would, just in terms of due process for them, the idea that their allegations would not be tested in court until potentially 10 years have elapsed on the Romania case, I mean, I'm sure you would agree that isn't due process. That isn't fair on them either.
Well, I would agree that this whole thing from the beginning has been a farce. I would agree that, yes, the prosecutor now has a choice. He can either throw the entire file out and I get extradited to the UK, but then the Romanian state owes me a whole bunch of money for false imprisonment. So they can't do that. So they have to send something to court, of course, and that's going to take 10 years. So this whole thing from the beginning has been a farce. The whole thing's been a setup from the beginning. The process is to punishment from the beginning. I've never done anything wrong from the beginning. And when we first met, when you were here and we were discussing Israel, Gaza, and all those things, all of our discussions were around this Romania case, which was thrown out after our meeting. And now we have this new British case, which popped up after our meeting. And one of them already got thrown out already. And then there's another one, which they're trying to extradite me on, but they won't tell me who the victims are. I mean, Piers, if they said to your son 20 years ago he hurt a girl, but we won't tell you who, where, when, we won't tell you anything. We'll just say 20 years ago you hurt a girl, and we won't give you any details. Of course, you're going to sit there and go, well, this sounds made up. I don't even know where this is supposed to have happened. I don't even know the person's name. This is obviously a farce. The whole thing's been a farce from the beginning. And just so you understand, the primary objective of all of this is twofold. One is to stop me voluntarily going to England because they know I'm a political force and they know I'll overthrow Labour. And secondly, the main reason is so that every time my name is said, people talk about the allegations against me as opposed to my ideas. They don't want anyone to talk about my fantastic ideas or my fantastic influence. They want people to talk about the allegations against me, which is why they try and keep these allegations open and going on for so long. There is no due process, Piers, because there is no guilt. There isn't even any victims in all of this.
Well, the reality is we don't know that yet. And in relation to your ideas, as you heard from me to your face in our last interview, which got pretty passionate, as it often does, you know, I don't share some of your ideas. I think some of them are reprehensible. But it is a fact, as I say to people, that when I walk around, I'd say 1 in 5 young men who come up to me want to talk about you. And you know what they ask me? Is he guilty? And I don't know. I don't know. But I do know they're going to see headlines like today, and they're going to see it immediately spun incorrectly by a lot of people on both sides, people that hate you and people that love you. and they're going to spin it to suit their agenda. And that is why it's really important to me as a journalist to keep to the facts as we know them. So the question about Romania, if they decide to make a final decision about you, say for argument's sake, they drop the charges against you tomorrow, you would then be presumably immediately extradited to the UK. Is that your understanding?
I don't think it would work immediately. They would have to file to drop the charges, and they would have to justify to drop the charges, and they'd have to explain why they put me through all of these things while they don't have a case. And then Cheto would come involved because the European court would have to get involved for why I was falsely imprisoned, and I was locked up for 3 years, and they'd owe me about $100 million in false and lost income. And then there'd be a whole case around that. All my judicial processes would have to finish in Romania before I could be extradited. So either way, it's a minimum of 10 years.
Is your instinct that you don't know who's brought these allegations to Bedfordshire police in these 21 charges, but we know it's 3 women in your case, 1 in Tristan's case. Is it your belief that all of those women are more likely than not to have worked for you and Tristan?
Absolutely not. I know every girl who worked for me, and they all contacted me and defended me. Every single girl who's ever worked for me has defended me. What happened is, when the Romanian case started to fall apart after we were let out of jail, and the British Foreign Office, who wrote to the Romanians and said, destroy these guys, the Romanians said there's nothing to destroy them with. Then the National Crime Agency launched something called Operation Moonwalk, and they called 2,000 women who had ever known me, my gardener's daughter, my neighbors who I used to live next to, 2,000 women. And amongst those 2,000, they managed to find 3 girls who, of course, are lying for financial gain. And they've come up with this entire bogus case. And I've said, okay, who are the girls? And they're saying, we're not telling you. We're not going to tell you when. We're not going to tell you where. We're not going to tell you who. We're just going to say you've done bad things 15 years ago. And it's a whole big farce from the beginning. If you call 2,000 women who a man has ever known throughout his entire life, of course you can find 3 liars, considering that 20% of people are on antidepressants and 10% of people have mental health issues. I'm surprised they only found 3 of the 2,000. But it's a whole farce from the beginning. It's never going to stand up in court. It's not fair. And if they did the same thing to your sons, called 2,000 women they'd ever interacted with, they'd find 3 girls to lie too. That's just human nature. So the whole thing's been a setup from the beginning. None of it's ever been fair. None of it's ever been fair.
Your UK solicitor, Andrew Ford, welcomed today's decision and said, despite much external pressure, the evidence speaks for itself in this case, and the Crown Prosecution Service have rightly confirmed the evidence is inadequate to provide any realistic prospect of conviction. The reason the CPS made this decision will become obvious when the evidence is played out during these civil proceedings. So, I mean, what is he suggesting there? What do you believe is going to come out of the civil case, which is going to make this decision by the CPS obvious?
Well, I have an upcoming civil case, so I have to be careful what I say. But in a hypothetical scenario, if girls are going to accuse a man of rape or sexual assault, and then continue to see him for years afterwards, and continue to text him, and continue to buy him birthday presents, and continue to beg to want to be with him, and continue to call his phone and sit outside his house when he doesn't reply to them, and then start asking him for money and getting very angry when they don't get money, I think it's pretty clear to see the motivations behind a false criminal accusation. I don't think anybody with a functioning mind, is going to be confused about why this is happening. And the Bedfordshire case is garbage too. All of this is garbage. Piers, I understand you're a journalist. I understand you have to be very careful what you say. However, you are a father to sons, and it's very unfair that we live in a world now where any man can just be unfairly attacked, unfairly lied about, and they have to suffer the process of this entire insanity for years before eventually it turns out the girls lied. Because what happens to those liars?
Well, look, I think it's very unfair. I think it's very unfair if anyone doesn't get due process, whether that's a male who's been accused of things, a woman who's making the allegations. The legal system should work properly, and there are far too many examples where it doesn't work properly. I don't know. In your case, like I keep saying, I have no idea how this is all going to finally unravel. All we do know as a fact today is that so far you have not been convicted of any crimes. That is the only fact that we know for sure.
Yeah, and that's a very important fact, because if we keep in mind I was enemy number 1 of the system, I was the most Googled man on the planet, that federal agencies from 3 different countries, America, UK, Germany, Poland, Romania, 5 different countries have investigated me, that I've handed over all of my electronics. If I had done anything, if I had smoked weed, if I had taken steroids, if I had gone to an orgy, if I had had a homosexual experience, if I had done anything, all of these things would be all over the paper. And what do they have on me? Nothing. I'm cleaner than 99% of the people you walk past in the mall. Because if anyone else had their lives investigated to the level mine's been, you'd see a whole bunch of skeletons in their closet. I haven't done anything. I raise my children. I work hard. I train hard. I don't do drugs. I don't drink. I haven't done anything. And they're very disappointed by how clean my life is. And that's the truth, because they have been desperate to put me in a cell, desperate. And they've given the NCA, Operation Moonwalk, Britain, as broke as it is, dedicated hundreds of thousands of pounds to trying to put me in jail, as if they don't have other things to pay for, as the streets of London run with blood. They have tried so hard, and they are failing. I am an innocent man. It is not that hard to put a guilty man in jail.
Final question. You've talked before about having a relationship of kind with some of the Trump family. Have you heard from any of them recently?
No, I think they've got much bigger concerns than my cases. I don't think they're very interested in any of my cases. I've always been a Trump fan. I think he's, the best choice for America. I think he's doing a fantastic thing. But they're not interested in trying to help me in any way. When I went to America, when I first got released from Romania, I didn't hear from them either. So I haven't heard from them, but I think that perhaps a lot of Republicans understand, because of what happened to our great president, that the legal systems are very often weaponized by the enemies of truth to attack people who have done nothing wrong. Remember, Trump himself went through a whole bunch of bogus legal cases. Trump himself was actually convicted. I haven't even been convicted. Trump himself was convicted of all these stupid allegations and heinous crimes on very little evidence. So I think most functioning people now understand the legal system can be weaponized. And they understand that what's happening to me is very clearly lawfare. I'm very clearly a victim of a corrupt system, because I'm speaking the truth against the matrix. And anybody with a functioning mind can see that.
Well, it remains to be seen whether any of what you just said is correct. What we do know with Donald Trump, actually, just to be technically correct, he wasn't convicted of anything other than one set of charges relating to a one-night stand with a porn star, which I thought at the time was utterly ridiculous overreach against a president of the United States who had only recently been in office, and made a mockery of the justice system in America. The other cases, as we know, they are no longer active. They were discontinued. But that particular one that they convicted him of, I thought was a complete farce.
Absolute ridiculous overreach of the American judicial system. It was an absolute ridiculous overreach of the British judicial system to put people in jail for Facebook messages. And it's an absolute ridiculous overreach of the Romanian judicial system to lock me in my house for 3 years and then have the case thrown out because they made up the victims, because it was all completely fake. Please understand, in any other country, which isn't so corrupt, prosecutors would be in jail for what they did to me here. You can't just make up victims and make up papers and print out lies and put people in jail.
Let me ask you a question. Just talking to you today, you sound very calm, very direct, completely different to how you were in our last interview, where you started ranting quite regularly about all sorts of stuff. And at the end of it, we got into it about your views about women's place in society. You said they should have no right to vote, they should have no power, they should not have any job, they should stay at home, and so on. And I got a lot of feedback to that, which was, whatever you think of Andrew Tate, whether you think he's guilty or not of these charges, and we just don't know yet because they're still ongoing. But whatever you think of him, he does himself absolutely no favours in the way that he talks about women. And he does it so brazenly and with such apparent pride. You know, when you think back to our last exchange, are you entirely comfortable with the way that you talked about women in that interview?
Absolutely. I think you just misunderstand me. Women are very powerful creatures. In fact, they're magical creatures because they give life. And a woman's power is to give life and to be a feminine woman who is the head of a beautiful family and to have as many children with the man she loves as possible. That is what women are fantastic at. That is what society needs. Our birth rates are collapsing. And that's what inspires men to be their best selves. When men see they have a wife who's had their children, that makes a man want to be a good man for that woman. I never said women are powerless. I said that protecting society is the job of men. Police officers should be men, and that the voting and the political matters and the judicial system, a lot of that should be men, because we're evolutionarily designed to protect territory in a way that females perhaps aren't. And it's our job to protect women. We're not trying to protect ourselves. A man's trying to protect his wife, protect his kids, protect his society, protect his town. And I think that the reason that the Western societies are in such trouble now is that everything is conflated. The men are doing the things that women are actually good at innately, and the women are doing things that the men are innately good at. I believe we have God-given talents, and I believe if we all stick to what we're naturally good at, it will optimize our society. It's not a matter of hating women, Piers. It's not a matter of saying that women have no power. It's not a matter of trying to subjugate women at all. It's a matter of protection. It's a matter of me understanding as a man, I have certain duties and certain jobs to do. And I believe a woman has certain duties and certain jobs to do. And that's why I have so many fantastic relationships with women. That's why I have so many children. That's why I take care of them so fantastically and keep them safe. That's why they look up to me and admire me and love me. If I was truly a misogynist, I wouldn't be suffering from all of these offspring and all of these beautiful relationships which I have. So I think it's just a matter of misunderstanding.
As you were talking, I just reminded that this weekend the England women's rugby team became world champions, and I watched that game. I don't think they need any help from you, and I don't think they need any guidance about what a woman's place in the world should be. They're world champions because they play a sport at a supremely elite level. I watched it and could not believe the staggering amount of skill and power and pace on display in a women's rugby match, and that's to their great credit. So they shouldn't all be kept at home, because actually that's not what most women want to do. But anyway, I'm going to leave it there for now. Andrew Tate, I appreciate you coming back on Uncensored. I will follow, as I said to you, I will follow the facts, and if they change, they change. I will keep talking to you, and we'll see where it all leads.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Before we go, can I just ask a very simple question? I'm curious as to your input, because I do consider you a professional who knows a lot about the world. Do you agree there's something very suspicious about the criminal cases involving me? Just suspicious. Do you think something strange has happened?
Well, I don't think it even matters what I think about it. I think what matters is, have you, at the moment, been convicted of any crime? People say, why do you platform Andrew Tate? And I said, why shouldn't I? They said, because he's a criminal. He's an abuser. He's this, and this. And I say, well, actually, as things stand, he has not been convicted of any of those crimes. He's been accused by a lot of people. But the significance of today is that a whole police case against you in one police force has, from a criminal perspective, been dropped. They said the evidence didn't reach the bar for criminal prosecution. That is noteworthy. That's why I've got you on today to discuss it, and I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you very much, sir.